Hi guys, we're on our way to check out Stellar VR's game Korix. We're here at Stellar VR down in Milton Keynes. VR to check out Korix on the PlayStation VR. So let's just get straight into it. Mark, tell us a little bit about what Korix is.
Well, Korix is kind of a mashup between real-time strategy and tower defense.
Yep.
So I've always been a big fan of real-time strategy and kind of had a little bit of an epiphany that on a console platform, having tracked controllers solves a lot of the control problems you have with real-time strategy style of games. And I also find turret defense highly addictive. You know, I've got several on my phone, and just kind of thought that mashing those two concepts together would make for a really fun game. So yeah, I was just basically trying to build a game that I would love.
Yeah.
And it just grew from there.
Good stuff. And regarding the VR aspect of it, was it always something you planned for PlayStation VR, or was it just something you wanted to see in VR and you took it from there?
Well, it started off because I was learning game development as a hobby, and the only reason I started to do that was because of VR. I wasn't really into game dev until I tried a DK2, and I just started brimming with ideas like, what if someone did this? What if someone did this? Loads of people felt that way.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, well, how hard can it be, really? So I downloaded a copy of Unity.
Yeah.
I started teaching myself C#, and started playing around with ideas. I created a few little demos that came out on the Oculus Share, and actually one of the demos I created was a very early version of Corix. It's very basic, but it was exploring the gameplay elements and the fusion of the two genres, and people seem to really like it. I sent a copy over to Sony because they have like a website where you can tell them what projects you're working on, because they were particularly interested in anything going on in the VR area, because they were working on the Morpheus at the time. And yeah, and I got a phone call back saying, we really like the concept, can you come for a chat? So I go down to their head office in London. We chill out for the afternoon. They show me the prototypes and we play around in VR. And they asked me to develop it for PSVR. So they sent me some equipment to help me out. I ported it to PlayStation VR, the original janky, very basic experience. And then their strategic content got in contact with me and said, what would it take to make this meteor titles? You know, a bit more than a very basic experience. And I said, I need to quit my job and develop it further. And they said, okay. And next thing I know, they've backed me, they funded me, I quit my job. And yeah, I'm bringing it to PSVR. So the reason I'm doing this for PSVR is because of the story, because of the journey I've been on. And if I'll be honest, if it wasn't for Sony and their support, I would not be making computer games right now. You know, I'd still have my day job.
Yeah. So let's go back to you saying that you started programming, you taught yourself this. Is this something that you've done before? You taught yourself from scratch, I presume. And how hard has that been, learning that process to develop for VR? You know, something like a normal 2D game, even a 3D game, is probably a completely different process, or has there been similarities there?
Well, coming from someone without lots of experience developing 2D games, I had a very fresh perspective. So I think that maybe it avoided some confusion, because there are some things and techniques and tweaks that you can't use in VR that you can use in 2D development. Yeah. But as I came from fresh, I didn't even know the tricks of the 2D world. But yeah, it was, you know, if you set your mind to it, you dedicate a couple of hours a day to it. There's so much support out there. There's so many blogs, forums, YouTube videos, guides, that if you just immerse yourself in it, you spend the time and you just have fun with it and play around with the tools that are available to you, almost anyone can do it.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's great.
So then going on to the game, a little bit more about the game itself. What's the basic premise of Korix? What is the idea behind the game itself?
So basically, in Korix, your race's homeworld has just been destroyed by some giant bolt from the sky. And it starts off with you fleeing your planet, and you're thrust into this world where you basically need to exact revenge by basically you're collecting crystals by destroying the enemy base, and you use that to then take the fight back to the enemy. So it's kind of like a Battlestar Galactica, end of civilization, but just trying to survive and to exact revenge against the enemy.
Damn you.
But the game itself is very retro-inspired. It's very much harking back to the days of Command and Conquer, Red Alert, Supreme Commander, but with a tower defense style and twist to it.
You mentioned retro style there. It allows you to fill in the blanks and use your imagination. So the little characters are just little polygons, but they've still got that character in them.
Yes.
You're playing multiplayer. You mentioned this as well, that you've got different faces you can do, and how you worked in that.
So basically, we have options where players can choose their avatar online. And as I was developing the game, very quickly realized it's better to go more abstract than it is to try and get close to reality, especially when you're dealing with avatars. It's very easy to drop into the uncanny valley. And in one experiment, I had 3D scanned using photogrammetry, I think that's how you pronounce it, my wife's head, and brought that in and then put it on. And it was just freaky because, the 1,000-mile stare, but it was technically very accurate. It was very high quality capture, very high polygon count, very high quality texture, but just it's not a real person. The skin isn't moving, twitching, the eyes aren't moving correctly, and at the moment you can't get that right. No one can get that right now.
Unless you're spending hundreds of millions of pounds on like a film or something.
Exactly.
But
even then you can't really do that in a VR world on a normal rig. So it's actually better to go in the opposite direction. It's better to go more abstract, keep things very simple, low poly, very clean. But you need to transfer the body language through. So what we do in the online game is we're 10 to 15 frames per second on the head and controller. And that allows, and it's a very raw, we don't do a lot of manipulation of that movement. So the subtle kind of head movements and emotions come through the body language. And then you, in your brain, you impart the emotions onto the head. So even though it's a very low poly head, you very quickly understand that that person is upset or angry or happy from the body language, because they're, yay, like this, or, or they're looking down, and you can tell subtly. It's almost at a subconscious level. It's very interesting. But yes, we moved away from high poly realistic very quickly. We moved into the low poly area, and it works really well.
Yeah, and it's probably a bit easier to code as well, maybe in some sense, a bit easier to work around.
It is,
especially coming from.
And of course, it's easier to run on console platforms and stuff like that.
So what are you running on a technical level? Like you said to me, it was 120 frames. The full 120
Yes, Corix
frames
runs at 120 frames per second with reprojection on. I believe we're the very first title to do that.
What is the reprojection? Just like explain that to someone who's maybe not aware of that.
So if we're rendering at 120 frames per second, we have 8 milliseconds to move everything around, run the game logic, have things shoot stuff, bring stuff into the scene, stuff out of the scene, and then render it. If we're a little bit late on that, let's say because something strange is going on, or there's a lot of activity at that particular point in time, we overrun, the reprojection then kicks in, and what it'll do is if you've moved your head in any orientation, it will take the last frame and just turn it slightly, so that you still have a very, very smooth head movement, even though the game may have dropped from 120 down to 60. So the reprojection is there just to catch it. If it all goes crazy and people have just launched an entire armada at you and everything's going crazy, then it can drop a little bit, and then we reproject it in. But because we wanted it to run at 120 native wherever possible, that's the technique we use.
And you've also got things like the fixed view that rotates around in set parts, so it's not going to create any motion sickness, which might affect some people. So that works really well. Is there anything during the development process that raised its head that caused you a lot of problems with making something like this, or has it been fairly smooth, apart from learning, obviously the learning curve?
I think it's my learning curve. It's going from being in IT to developing computer games, it's marketing. It's on development, it's about optimization. I started this project full time 8 months ago, maybe 9 months ago now, thinking along the lines of, well, I've got a working game. It's completely playable now. All I need to do is replace a few of the assets with some nice looking turrets and stuff, so it looks a bit nicer. A few particle effects here and there. Port it over to PlayStation. Job done, right?
Sounds easy.
But see you in a month. Oh no. No. It's so much work. It's just everything cascades down. You'll make a tweak here, change that, and that cascades down, cause a load of other things. Also optimization. To get it to run at 120 frames per second has probably taken me at least a month and a half of full-time work to get it running that smooth. And if anything, it's because, in the very early days, it was running at 60, which is a lot of PlayStation VR titles run at 60 with reprojection. And that's great, that's fine. But on our game, because it's a tabletop game, the players are leaning around like this, sideways. So when you reproject, you lose some of that. So you end up with a slight blurring when objects are so close, because this is all in miniature as well. So things are close and small and moving sideways, which doesn't work so well running at 60. So we ran it at the higher frame rate to make sure everything was really nice and smooth.
Let's go into a little bit more about the game itself. Tell us a little bit more about the details of the game. Okay,
sure. So there's a single player campaign that's got 8 levels, but normally it takes, if you're good, 3 hours, maybe 5 hours if you've not played RTS too much before. It's a really good challenge. It's very old school. We didn't want it just to be like browsing content. We didn't want it to be easy. Very few people, there's a challenge out there, very few people just go straight into it and complete each level one at a time. I've not seen that happen yet. So yes, it's a good challenge. We also have a skirmish mode. So as you play through the campaign, you unlock levels and you unlock units, so turrets and units. And then you can go back and replay those with your unlocks and replay the different levels. And then also where the real fun is, we've got the online play. So we've got 14 online levels to choose from. 2 to 4 players. You can play it in cooperative against the enemy base, or you can do versus with or without the enemy in the middle. So that's where the fun really kicks in. So there's 6 different classes of enemy that come at you. They're sort of ranging different speeds and powers and abilities. You have 5 different turrets to choose from. Well, I say turrets. You've got laser, artillery, you've got a pulsar, which slows things down. You've also got anti-aircraft. You've got a collector, which allows you to build a forward base. So the game starts off with you protecting your base, collecting resources with workers. But very soon you can drain your resource down, so then you need to build forward, capture another resource, which is great for the online play, because that's when players start fighting over resources. You get that whole to and fro, and it starts becoming a little bit like chess, where people capture resources and then defend it. And it becomes a lot of fun. And then you've also got your own units that you can build to attack the enemy base or the enemy player. So you've got soldiers, tanks, megabots, or aircraft, and you've also got nukes. So you can just nuke them. There is an anti-nuke, so there is a way of countering that. So you need to make sure you time it right, or you get it at the right point of the game. But yeah.
So being an indie dev, obviously there's challenges that come with that. What's the best way, if someone's checking out your game, what's the best way they can support indie devs like yourself?
The biggest struggle indie devs have, in my opinion, is getting the word out there and marketing. Is getting our story heard and having people know about our game. Some indie devs can create amazing quality titles, which are absolutely fantastic, but they don't have multi-million-dollar marketing budgets. So a lot of the time they can fly under the radar and people don't know about them. So, to your viewers out there, if you find an indie game that you like, tell people about it. Put scores on review websites, make sure you rate them if you like them. Hell, rate them if you don't like them. Just rate them, and tell your friends about it. And that's the best way of getting...
share it around.
Yeah, exactly. Just share it around and tell your friends. And that's the best way. And if anything, it means there's more people to play the game with.
No, exactly,
you know?
especially with the online parts.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the game, is there a date when it's going to be released, and are you able to tell us more about like the price, or where it's going to be PlayStation exclusive?
It's a time-limited exclusive, so it will be on PlayStation for a period of time. We'll be launching on PC latter half of this year. That's what we're aiming to do.
And for Frank's viewers, is there anything specific you'd like to leave a message for Frank and his viewers? Apart from Aloha headsets.
Just keep watching, it's a great channel.